Being a software engineer, have you ever wondered that why don't we have just one language that can do it all? A software engineer today is like surrounded by multiple language stacks. It is like helpful to pick one, only to realize later that it got irrelevant as soon as next year. Well, I have picked up 8 of the top language stacks that we have today in the world, and we will try to have like a bare bones idea of how they work, what's happening behind the scenes, and what are the differences. Well, my name is Gaurav, you are watching 100GB, and let's roll the intro. So, what is a coding language? Well, I'm pretty sure you guys are familiar with that, but just for the sake of posterity, we have this computer or an electronics device and we want it to do something. Well, of course, it doesn't understand our natural language, English. Maybe it does today. Well, fundamentally, it doesn't. It just understands zeros and ones, bits and bytes. So we introduced this thing called coding language, which is kind of a middle ground, which we understand, which the computer kind of understands through some transformations. We feed code into the computer runs it and generates an output. Pretty simple. Now let's see like what a generic stack of any coding language looks like. We have the code on the top. And then we have the compiler that transforms the code into the machine code, which is understood by the bare metal or the computer. The way you can compile code is basically you can either use compiler directly or you can use a build system where you get additional benefits, like including libraries and other modules and whatnot. Well, in all the diagrams that we'll see, the dotted rectangle that you will see, it basically represents the platform dependent component. Now, the code for every language is generally platform independent, as in you copy the code and you wrote the code in Linux, then you copy it and you take it to Mac or Windows. The compilers are generally platform dependent and they compile the same code. So compiler has two phases. One is known as compiler front end, which is the analysis phase, which basically does all the grammar check and the lexical analysis. And the second phase is the compiler backend, which is the actual generation. So it takes in the stuff that is generated by the front end and then it converts it to the machine code. By the way, whatever I will mention in this video should be taken with a grain of salt, as in this is just an oversimplification of all the languages that we have today. I mean, if people start bashing me, it's totally fine. I don't mind that much. But people have done PhDs in just one, in let's say just compiler, and we are talking about multiple languages. Compiler is just one small part of it. Next, we have the C or C++ language stack. Most popular, I'm pretty sure most of the programmers already know about this. So we have the C code on the top or C++, which goes through the compiler. It could either be Clang, GCC, or some other compiler that you are using. The compiler is, of course, platform dependent, and all the magic happens in this compiler. The code goes through a few intermediate representations. So the first thing that happens in case of C++ is the pre-processing, because it needs to resolve all the macros that you're using. It gets converted into this thing called abstract syntax tree, which is basically a data structure used by almost all the compilers to represent the code so that the further stages can actually read all the blocks, variables, and whatnot. It gets converted to LLVM IR. This, I think, is specific to Clang. For GCC, there is some other internal intermediate representation. It is finally fed to the compiler backend, which generates the machine code, which goes to the bare metal, and finally the output. Nothing super fancy. Well, wait till you see Dart. Well, next is your favorite language, Rust. Well, I see a lot of Instagram reels these days on Rust. Anyway, we have the Rust code on the top. It gets fed into this Rust C compiler. Again, you can either use Rust C compiler directly or you can use the package manager, which is Cargo, which in turn uses Rust C for the compilation. Now, I see Rust as like a modern version of C++ with slightly different syntax, and on top of it, it actually has really nice features: ownership, borrowing, lifetime checks. You don't have to like manually manage the memory. Now, the way Rust brings all these modern features is by having a fancy compiler. So the compiler front end, it does all the heavy lifting and brings about most of these features. Then the code goes through almost similar stages like the AST. But there are a few extra intermediate representations like HIR, MIR, LLVMIR. Finally, it is fed to the backend, which converts the code into the machine code, and bare metal, then output. And of course, like machine code and the compiler itself, they are platform dependent. And bare metal, like needless to say. All right, Golang, another like super fun language. Not kind of little bit excited about it because I had like limited exposure to Golang in my previous job, and I attended a few workshops here at Google. I like the language, but I also remember when I was writing like REST APIs in Golang, I had to do that interface ampersand to represent the JSON blob, which was kind of funny. Well, anyway, so at the top we have the Go code and this Go runtime library. This Go runtime library itself is written in Go, and it uses assembly as well for some reason. These two codes, they are fed to the Go compiler, which is effectively, the stages are very similar to C, C++. The code gets converted to machine code, which gets sent over to the bare metal, which runs it and generates the output. Pretty simple. Now, the fun part or the unique features about Go are basically the garbage collection, Go routines, scheduling mechanism, memory management, primarily the Go routines and channels. So Go takes a very simple approach. It's slightly different from Rust. Rust is more about where the magic happens in the compiler. Golang is all about the runtime library. Think of it like it has actual code which is running in parallel to your code, which brings about all these features. And let's go to the next one now. All right, now Python. The snake, not really the snake. So for Python, we have the Python code at the top. Of course, it goes through the Python compiler, which is actually a transformer that transforms the code into lower level. It doesn't compile the code into the machine code, and that's why it's not referred to as a compiler. It's actually kind of a transformer. So think of it like it still does most of what a compiler front end does, of like having the lexical analysis, generating AST and whatnot. Finally, spitting out this C Python bytecode, which itself is platform independent. You can take it to the other machine and then have it interpreted by the VM. We have this thing called Python interpreter, which is a virtual machine, which reads this bytecode, and then at runtime it interprets it, generates a machine code. Machine code goes to bare metal, and the output. Very simple. I'm pretty sure by this time you are able to see a pattern in all the languages. So compiler can either spit out machine code, which gets run on the bare metal directly, or the compiler can give out some kind of representation or some kind of encoding, which is read by an entity which is already running on the bare metal, which in this case is the VM. And now we'll see all the other language stacks that we'll see. Mostly they'll have some kind of VM. And when we talk about VMs, the first language that we have is Java. Java, I think it means coffee, like literally coffee or hot chocolate. I don't know. Okay, Java code at the top. It gets fed to the Java compiler, which is also referred to as JDK. So again, you can either use the Java C compiler directly, or you can use your favorite package manager, right, like Gradle, Maven, Bazel, whatever. Java compiler compiles the code into this intermediate thing called Java bytecode or a jar file, which again, now in order for a bare metal to run it, we need to have some kind of runtime environment, which is known as JRE, which is the actual JVM, like the virtual machine, which reads the bytecode, then converts it into the machine code, and machine code is finally something which is run on the bare metal, and it finally generates the output. Now again, it continues on that pattern, and since it has a VM, it has very nice capabilities around garbage collection and memory management. All right, Java stack with a twist of Android. Well, most of the things remains the same. The only additional step here is that the Java bytecode is in turn fed to this DEX compiler. I think it is platform dependent, but I'm not 100% sure. Then DEX compiler generates this thing called Dalvik bytecode or DEX file. And this DEX file at runtime is finally read by the VM and then converted to the machine code. Now, this is not exactly like the JVM. It's you can think of it like a detuned version of JVM. And again, we don't have JRE. It's like Android runtime ART. Now, the dotted line that you see from VM to machine code is the fun part about Android. So Android runtime has this thing called AOT, which is known as ahead of time compilation. The way you should understand this is, so let's consider Facebook app. Now, Facebook app needs to run on, let's say, Galaxy S21, and there could be like hundreds of thousands of Galaxy S21 all across the world. And if some user on S21 downloads Facebook, which probably means that the Facebook's bytecode needs to be translated or converted to the machine code. Now, since this machine code will remain the same, it is platform dependent. Yes, it will remain same among all the Galaxy S21s, which means if the first user that downloaded it, if the code is already compiled on their machine, it it could in theory be uploaded to some server, and then when the next user downloads the same app from the Play Store, the same machine code could be downloaded along with the app to speed up the first run. And that's exactly what happens. So you can search for this thing called Android baseline profiles and give it a read. Super interesting stuff. By the way, you should notice that in the case of Android, whenever, let's say, you are running Facebook and Instagram apps on your mobile phone, there are like multiple instances of VMs created. Like for every app process, there is one VM which is instantiated, and that VM runs the Dalvik bytecode. All right, now we have the only bonus stack in this video, which is Dart or Flutter, especially on Android. Oh, very busy stack, lots of things going on. Let's try to understand what's happening. So on the top we have primarily two kinds of code, or maybe three. One is the Java code that is generated as part of the Flutter app, and sometimes even the developers, they have to write some kind of Java code because let's say there is some feature which is not available in Flutter, so you write the Java code, which is the Android code. Then you have the Dart code, which is the code that you write primarily for Flutter, which also has the Flutter framework, which is all the widgets and all the standard library that you use from Dart. And in addition to these two, you have the Flutter engine and Flutter Android Embedder, which are both of these are written in C++. And Flutter Android Embedder is it has to be platform dependent. So if you're using for iOS, or you're compiling for iOS, it'll be separate. It should be like Flutter iOS Embedder. For web, it'll be Flutter Web Embedder, and so on and so forth. So these two are hidden from the developers, as a developer, you don't even need to care about these two. So as part of the compilation, the Java code gets sent to the Java compiler, which again is platform dependent. It goes via Java bytecode, Dex compiler, and finally in the APK, it has the Dalvik bytecode. Then from the Dart side, it goes via the Dart compiler, and Dart compiler has the capability to compile directly to the machine code. And this machine code, so the thing is that Android can run the natively compiled C++ code because of JNI. And Dart can also compile to the native code. So it's just a matter of having the JNI do the job and run this native code. Not native code, I should say native machine code. And similarly, the Flutter engine and the Flutter Android Embedder, it goes through the GCCA or LLVM, and it also generates the native machine code, which also becomes part of the APK. And then finally at runtime, when the Art VM is created, Flutter Android Embedder is initialized as part of JNI, I believe, and then which in turn talks to the Flutter engine, and which finally instantiates this thing called Dart VM. Now Dart VM is not a VM, as in it's just, think of it like a runtime library, which in this shape right now is native code because it was already compiled. And finally, things get converted to the machine code, to the bare metal, and we see magical output, like literally. All right, finally JavaScript. I am sure most of you were waiting for this funny language which can do lots of different things. Well, I'm not going to cover the Node.js part of it. Anyway, it's not very different. So we have the JS code on the top, which gets compiled. And before you guys start bashing me, by compile, I mean minified by this thing called Webpack. In a few cases, like to reduce the size and whatnot. So this code is then sent to the browser over the wire, usually HTTP. Now the browser itself is platform dependent because if you want to have Chrome on iOS or on Mac, it needs to have a separate version. And then browser has this thing called V8 engine. Now V8 engine, think of it like a library, just a C++ library which is open source, which is used by the browsers to actually run the JS code. Now, since most of the browsers are written in languages that support C++, and that's how they are able to use the V8 engine as well. Now, the V8 engine is written in C++, and like most of the browsers and across all the platforms, they can and they do use V8 engine. V8 engine, as I could say that it is like platform independent. There are still a few bits inside the code which could be making platform dependent checks, like, hey, if I'm running on this, maybe this hardware or iOS, then do this. But I still need to have a deep dive, and maybe I'll create a separate video on that. Another thing is that V8 engine is more like an interpreter, but have some bits of compilation as well. And the code finally gets converted to the machine code, goes to the bare metal, and we have the output. And we are here towards the last stack for today, which is TypeScript. Well, TypeScript is strictly like a syntactical sugar over JavaScript. I mean, it has a few additional steps at the top. The code gets converted to JS code and everything else remains the same. Now, TypeScript has a TypeScript toolchain, which is kind of a compiler. It is known as transpilation. You can think of it like the compiler frontend that we talked about, which does the basic like grammar check, lexical analysis, because we need all these features like type safety, interfaces, enums, classes, optionals, whatnot. All of this happens as part of this pseudo compilation or transpilation. And that is pretty much it about the TypeScript. And we are towards the end of the video. Well, I hope, folks, it was really helpful. And if there is a particular language you want me to dive deeper into, just let me know in the comment section. I'll probably plan something out, if not in the next video, maybe in the coming months. Or if you have like some other topic that I should be creating videos on, just let me know in the comment section. Like and subscribe and share this video to your batchmates, friends, family. I will see you in the next one. Bye.